Welcome to Cube Cruisin', a Magic the Gathering podcast where we design, discuss, play through, and review a new cube each episode. I'm Eric, joined by my co-host Hayden.
Hello, I'm Hayden, joined by my co-host Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric. All right, what's on the docket for today, Hayden?
Today we're discussing the JUND cube. Green, black, and red only, white and blue excluded. Get out.
Yeah.
Don't want them anywhere near here.
Very specific theme. I'm excited to do this as our inaugural episode.
Me too. I think this is a shard that we both have a lot of affinity for. And that leads us right into why this cube. Why did we choose JUND? We like it, but what is there to it? What's the meat?
For me, at least, I like the idea, and I think we're both fans of junding them out, which is, I'm actually going to take this from a comment from a Redditor that we found, that the Jund shard of Alara is all about survival of the fittest and ruthless power. When in doubt, jund them out. It means if you're not certain, fall back on the magic fundamentals. Powerful cards, aggressive creatures, efficient removal. You know, just get them.
The goodies.
Yeah.
What more do you need than that?
Yeah. That's kind of like a definition that we found, but what is jund them out to you, Hayden?
JUND is all about value to me. It is getting ahead by, people often say 2 for 1ing. JUND, I'll take a 1.1 for 1. I'll take the long game, slowly getting ahead, step by step, until, as famous JUND pilot Reed Duke has said, you turn the corner. There's a point where you have gotten ahead by a certain degree, your opponent is behind by a certain amount, and you turn the corner. You switch from accruing value to taking advantage of that value and getting in, beating face, and going fast before they can then recover and stabilize at 1, the nightmare.
Yeah, the nightmare, yeah. That turning the corner, I think is a really good way to put it. I think that, and that's also just a great feeling when you have that in a game of Magic.
It feels like you've been building up a bit of, the tension's been rising, and now you make the decision, and it's something that is fun as a player, choosing like the decision point of when do I go, when do I hit the gas. Then it's a race, and that's fun. Oh, there's just so much about JUND that speaks to why I love playing Magic. Good creatures, good removal, getting them, going fast, being good, which I am not always.
Yeah, no, I feel very similarly. To me, just the flavor of JUND, having these just badass, highly threatening creatures, and you just want to get into the red zone. Just a lot of death and destruction through nasty removal, scavenging your graveyard for resources. Elegance and thoughtful cleverness is not what comes to mind when I think of JUND, which is nice. Sometimes you just wanna not really think too hard, and you just want to turn them sideways and just get them. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's definitely reflected in how the cube was constructed. Aside from just having the 3 colors that make up JUND, black, red, and green, we also looked at how mechanically we can feel like junding them out and what doesn't feel like that. So creatures with protection we've chosen to not have, I'm not sure if there are any, very few of, if they're...
Yeah, hopefully there shouldn't be any, or very situational type stuff.
Yeah, Gruul Spellbreaker has the line, as long as it's your turn, you and Gruul Spellbreaker have hexproof, but that is more conditional, sort of stops you from getting got, which is fine, but it is not a blanket, you can't target this, or ward, it's asking to pay extra. Your creatures will die. My creatures will die. And there's a lot that kills. There's prevention of the mid-range soup board stall. Things are going to be eliminated.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think the other things that we're focusing on too is only having 3 colors in a cube, you still want to have a variety of archetypes, and just looking at the individual color pairs with Rakdos and Golgari and Gruul, there's, I think, a lot of flavor and gameplay identity for each of them. Archetypes ranging from Sacrifice to Graveyard to the Gruul Unga Bunga, which is kind of just the nasty 3-4 drop, high creature quality creatures that just kind of outclass the smaller ones. Still like a lot of aggression, some like 2-for-1s, like Hayden was saying, a lot of value. And again, just that high creature quality and like premium removal, which I think fits into all of these color pairs.
When going through the previous list we made sort of a preliminary cube, and then the one we are testing now, link in the description to the first version of this cube that we're running currently. There was cards like Magma Jet, which have Scry 2. And we sort of came to the decision when mulling over everything, reviewing the cards, that Scry itself didn't feel in the essence of Jund.
Yeah, Scry feels like a very thoughtful, like mystical type effect that flavor-wise didn't really fit with what we felt is Jund as core theme.
I think that was the only card we had originally that had Scry on it as well.
Maybe like a handful as we were building it, we were looking, it's like, oh, well, this has Scry. I don't know if this exactly like feels like it. So those were some of the minor restrictions that we placed upon ourselves once building this cube.
Yeah, and just looking at the list, I think it's for the better. Because
Yes.
it's a pretty small-sized cube. It's not a full 360. I think the current number is 201.
When we were going through and like putting this together, we were aiming for a goal of 198, mainly because of the way that we're planning on drafting it, because it's just Hayden and myself. So at this size, you can accommodate different 2-player drafts, such as a grid draft, a pancake draft, and a houseman draft. Links in the description for all of those. They're all very fun ways to draft 2 players, some of the favorite that I enjoy. The other thing that we're like kind of targeting with this cube that we're looking to test out is a high density of multicolored card. Obviously a lot of like Rakdos, Gruul, Golgari, and a low density of colorless, because artifacts to me didn't feel too Jund.
Yeah, there are a few that have their place in like aggressive histories, like your Bone Splitters, your Grafted War Gears,
Your worm coils.
I have my own gripes with Worm Coil Engine, but it's nothing that everyone hasn't said before. But a lot of artifacts don't fit the feeling of Jund, and that's sort of a nebulous thing that we've designed this around is, does it feel Jund to us? Yes, you could run down a card and like, it's good for these reasons, but does it match what the ideal, the perfect red, black, green? Does this really fit in? I don't think so. Does that?
Yeah, and I mean, these are also like what Hayden and I feel is Jund, and hopefully we still capture that general essence the greater community feels about this shard.
Absolutely.
If we want to get down into like a little bit like the numbers for anybody who is interested in trying to like recreate a 2-player 3-color cube, the general breakdown was about 20% or 40 of the monocolor cards, so 40 black cards, 40 red cards, 40 green cards. The multicolor section was a little bit larger at 24%, so that was about 48 cards. Colorless, like we're saying, is pretty low density at 5% with 10 cards. And the lands we found, especially with like a 2-player draft, you're able to usually get them pretty well. So that's floating around the 10% amount with 20 cards. And so that brings us to the 198, 201. There's a few cards in there that we just were like, oh, like let's just put it in and not worry too hard about what's coming out.
Yeah, just test it out. The lands number might also be higher than a different shard, like a Bant cube, because there is a lands package in this cube. So Field of the Dead is in there. I believe there are 4 on-color lands for each guild.
Yes, about that. What are we hoping to learn about this? Because at the end of the day, this podcast is meant to inspire and instruct, also just for our own stuff. We're unsure how exactly this experiment will play out. Can a cube function by removing 2 out of the 5 colors and still feel like a diverse amount of archetypes? We also are curious if we're able to capture the feeling of Junding them out with this wide variety of archetypes, because usually like in like competitive formats, it's a pretty specific archetype what is JUND in competitive.
Yes, you're also playing multiples of cards, whereas we're running this as a singleton cube. So without the certainty of 4 Bloodbraid Elves, of 4 Fatal Pushes, can that feeling still be captured? I'm confident that it can.
I think so.
But but testing is the fun part.
Yeah, exactly.
Playing the game is the fun part.
Yeah.
I'm personally interested in if the game will devolve into what I stated before, that mid-range soup. But I think how we have chosen to eschew protection on creatures, the high amount of removal there is, especially in red and black, I think the opposite problem may rear its head, where nothing can stay on the board. But that's another thing to think about and look out for.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out.
It is a different, more interesting problem, I feel, because then you're still interacting with your opponent. You're still playing the game, and they're doing the same with you, and that's a ton of fun. Whereas when you each have 4 or 5 creatures and nothing can get by and you're just waiting for, I know I have a Crater Hoof in my deck. It's one of these 20 cards and I just got to draw it and then I'm in. I think that's a much less interesting board state than, oh yeah, I finally got down my Sprouting Thranax and we're getting in. And if he kills it, I'm getting 3 1/1s, baby. He's not going to kill it. We're golden.
Yeah.
Literally, it's a gold card.
So yeah, about actually playing this. So how are we going to be drafting this? Today, we're going to be doing a 2-player grid draft, which I think is one of the most popular 2-player draft formats.
It's certainly my favorite of the 2-player formats.
Yeah, and I guess like a brief description on like how to do a grid draft. You basically arrange 9 random cards from the cube in a 3x3 grid. A player chooses a row or column and takes 3 of those cards. The second player then chooses the remaining row or column, and then that may contain 2 cards now. Then you discard the remaining 3 or 4 cards in the pile, then you lay out a new grid and repeat, alternating player picks first, and you do that for about 18 packs. With the cube that we created and the size, players see about 81.8% of the cube, and if you end up going like crazy and you want to see the whole cube, you can do 22 packs.
I really like grid drafting because there's the back and forth of like taking turns, who's going first, who's getting I'm doing air quotes, the superior line or column, row or column, I guess.
Yeah.
But then the second person still has a choice of like, well, these 2 cards are really good, and I'm putting myself at a disadvantage of not having as wide a pool to get the things that I know 100% that's in my deck.
Yeah.
It also encourages variance because not everything is being played. Like, as you said, upwards of 80% is being seen, but even less of that is actually in your pool.
Yeah.
And that's just fun. You're making sacrifices. Sometimes you're halfway through, you don't want anything from the 9 cards that have been put out. And sometimes it's too good. Sometimes the opposite problem. Sometimes you revel in riches and you're surrounded by treasure and you can't decide which good red 1-drops you want. You curse the luck that made that pack.
Yeah, I really like grid drafting, especially because it's all open information. So you know exactly what everybody's drafting. You can draft around that. You can like hate drafting if you're really feeling so inclined. But it's also nice for doing a 3-colored cube with open information, because then you are more likely to overlap in colors. So then you can also counterpick that, oh, I really want this black card so that my opponent doesn't have it. And doing it with this open information allows you to do that more freely, which is, I think, really nice about this format.
It's also advantageous for the designer because unlike, say, an 8-person, a traditional draft, 3 packs of 15, because it is all open information, you're seeing what your opponent is choosing. And if you know that they're in, say we're drafting the JUND cube and you know your opponent is in the mono red aggro deck, you can see what they're picking and not, and oh, I thought for sure this would be a priority for the mono red deck, but the person who's drafting that is not taking it. They're taking these other things. Why? And it creates more discussion. It gives you, as the designer, more information to make more informed changes going forward. It encourages discussion about Cube, which is what we're literally doing right now. So we like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and with that being said, we're going to dive right into the draft, and you'll see us after that.
Catchphrase.
Catchphrase. Good luck, have fun.
Usual.
Let's start off with a Thoughtseize.
What?
Move to combat.
Yep.
Cards in hand?
4.
Oh, that's so many.
No, that's game. These cards are sweet. This Cube rules. Well, we did it.
Well, yeah, we're back, and we just wrapped up the third draft. So overall, we ended up playing 3 drafts in total, and Hayden was the big winner between the whole overall, the best of 2 of the 3 drafts that we did.
Overall, we have our draft records. We started going to best of 5 instead of best of 3 to get more games, and because at that point we had both gone 2-0 for the first 2 drafts, like how about we play a little more? And you proceeded to then go 3-0 against me and absolutely blow me out. The third one we did, the final best of 3, was 3-1 in my favor. However, we both made adjustments after a couple games. Both ended up in the same colors, but they were much tighter. That was less of a blowout on either end.
Yeah.
Which is good, is what you want to see.
But yeah, we'll just quickly talk about what decks that we drafted. There's a wide variety of them, and it was very, very interesting, and definitely got a good feel of how the decks went. I know, like, my first deck was very interesting. I ended up opting for a mono red deck, and I quickly learned after playing against Hayden's 3-color deck that in the JUND cube, going monocolored, I just feel like it was just not up to snuff. Yeah, I was definitely scrambling for playables. I think I played every single red card that I had and just had no room for anything. I didn't really have any cuts, maybe one.
Yeah, I always love to see mono red come up in a draft in any cube I'm playing. Mono red, or just whatever your aggro section is, being viable is, I feel, a great test of a cube's strength and design. But it turns out that JUND good stuff, JUND pile, if you will, was just too good that time around.
Yeah, your deck really felt very JUND in that. Like, you had like so many of the staples. Like you Blood Red Elf me, you like Burning Tree Emissaried me, you had tons of removal. It did what JUND wanted to do.
Lots of creatures with bigger booties. Helena and Elena, pumping everything else, just making attacks more difficult for you. It felt really good. And then 1 or 2 Wraths as well, just in case. Toxic Deluge, for sure, was the most prominent one. But my fixing also really came together that game as well, which played a huge part.
Yeah, your fixing was really good in it. Got some fetches, fetchable lands. Yeah.
What good are fetches without the fetchables?
Exactly.
The second draft we did, you opted for a much different deck.
Yes, I definitely learned from the first draft being like, okay, like let's grab some lands, let's grab some multicolored cards, because like one of the main things that we're testing with this is just a 2-player cube with just a lot of multicolored cards, and it very much paid off. Spider Spawning is a busted card.
Spider Spawning, very good. Yeah, you were in Golgari sort of lands? Actually, I would say pretty dedicated lands. You had Life from the Loam.
Yes, yeah. This one was really nice because it kind of had a bit of like land stuff. I had like Life from the Loam, but I was also just doing some graveyard stuff like with Spider Spawning. That's kind of the game plan of this deck, is just get a bunch of creatures and cards into the graveyard through just like incidental like mills with like Grimflayer and like Secure Tribe Elder and like Jadelight Ranger with a bit of like Explore, but a bit of like the land stuff going on with Life from the Loam, which first time I've ever played with that card, it put in work. It drew me a lot of lands from my graveyard.
Dredge is a good mechanic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was on yet another JUND pile, 3-color good stuff, and it was not so good that time around. Not for lack of fixing, I just think I didn't prioritize certain cards, didn't get the same plan together, tried to ramp a little bit, but not fully committing to anything. Again, trying to be greedy, have my cake and eat it too. The most memorable moment from that was I cast Grave Titan, had Rhythm of the Wild, had 4 zombies. I was like, all right, we're on the comeback. This feels amazing. And you immediately damnationed me.
Yeah, that was, I think, key because I had Vraska. I had some, I think I had a insect token out, but I saved it so that I could sacrifice it to draw a card. And I ended up doing that and drawing the damnation from that. So that was definitely the biggest play of the drafts.
The biggest blowout,
Yeah.
for sure. And it was good to see that 3-color JUND is not just the optimal thing to be taking. It came together once, it will probably come together other times with the amount of multicolor. We're sort of incentivizing going into more colors, not just being mono black or mono red or mono green, the 3 colors. But seeing that, I will just take all of the best cards and fixing, and that will win me all of my games, is not true. Sometimes it is.
Yeah, I think in that draft as well, we were competing over cards a lot more just because there's a lot more overlap, which is nice to see, and I think was a nice outcome of playing with 3 colors. Especially in a 2-player cube, you're more likely to be fighting over colors and cards. I think particularly in JUND as well, being that so many of the cards are just general good stuff, so you're more likely to be wanting to just grab the best cards, and so you're going to be fighting against each other for those.
That's often a problem we would have in 2-player drafts of a more standard 5-color cube, is there would be very obvious colors or archetypes, thank you, that neither of us were in and were just junk. And well, I guess these white cards no one is really going for, so it decreases the amount of selection. Whereas drafting this cube all 3 times felt like all of these cards are sweet. What am I trying to do? But this feels so good. The picks were more difficult, but I think that was good. It showed there was a lot more value in every pack for both of us.
Yeah, and then the last draft that we just did earlier right before this ended up going, I think, learning from the previous drafts. I know I went for more of a JUND color spread, getting that like some of the Grists, some Vraskas, getting some just powerful, getting Bloodbraid Elf. I'm glad I think every single time Bloodbraid Elf was just made somebody's deck and just always did some stuff, which is great to see in a JUND cube.
I said it before, I'll say it again. One of my favorite things about JUND is comebacks off the back of casting a Bloodbraid Elf. Wins games.
Yeah, I think is interesting for me. I took the first game in that playing a JUND build, and then Hayden in the games 2 and 3 ended up just I think steamrolling me pretty good. And I'm you know what, I'm gonna try something out. And I ended up shifting it, and instead of having red as the splash color, I made black the splash color and went more of a lower to the ground, aggressive, a lot of hasty creatures. Tried to do a collected company thing with 8 or 9 3-drop creatures. Grist being a notable hit with collected company. Didn't come together, but I was hoping for that.
The dream.
It came down to you had 1 life. You stabilized at 1 life. The
classic JUND control line, stabilizing at 1.
Yeah.
You know what they say? All skill, no luck. I don't believe them. I don't believe the people that say that.
Yeah, so after drafting it a few times and playing through a bunch of games, how do we like it?
I really like it. I like it a lot. As I said before, the draft feels like your decisions have more impact and there's a wider range for you to select from because there are fewer colors, because everything is more viable instead of being able to safely lock off a section of the cube in a 2-player draft. I also like it because, as we said before we played all these games, JUND is good. We like JUND. That's why we made it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think to answer the question is like, can a cube function by removing like 2 out of the 5 colors? I think absolutely works. I think specifically in like a 2-player setting. So if anybody out there is interested in doing a 2-player cube, I think going for like 3 colors of magic is a really viable option. Finding the like wedge or shard that you're a big fan of and just building a cube around that. I think it was also just construction wise a lot easier not having to think about 2 of the 5 colors.
You can focus more on what speaks to you and the person you are playing with, just in what kind of magic you like to play. I've seen Bant cubes. You yourself have made a Mardu cube that played very differently from the JUND cube, but is still a ton of fun. Yeah, it's completely viable. Reiterating what you said, if people are thinking about making a 2-player cube, going for 3 colors is a great way to start.
The thing that was unique about just the JUND colors as well, it really did feel like the JUND 'em out flavor. Like you're saying, I made a Mardu cube before and that had a very different feel, where with the JUND colors, since a lot of it is just good stuff, I think you're more incentivized to have those overlaps. Like you're both going to be vying for the same colors. You're both going to be trying to go for 3 colors, which I don't think was necessarily a bad thing. I think it made the draft portion a lot more interesting and dynamic, just seeing like, oh, I really want to pick this row, but seeing like Hayden take a row that picked off one of the key cards that I really wanted was like, oh, okay, now I got to rethink it.
It made it more interesting. Did we capture the feeling of JUND 'em out? I say 100% we did. The choices we made design-wise, that things were dying, you gotta go fast, but there aren't board stalls, there's plenty of evasion, there are ample amounts of removal, and there are ways to get through whatever your opponent puts down, I think fully fit the JUND 'em out playstyle, and felt good. Even stuck on land, facing the beatdown, there's so like there are things I can do. I can be taking steps to mitigate this. Because if you're stuck on land, you have mana dorks. You can have removal. It just feels really good.
Yeah. I think like you're saying, there's a lot of effects in there that allowed you to like come back from things, like me top decking a damnation or casting like a Bloodbraid Elf just to be able to like get in that extra bit of damage. I think there's a lot of like interesting like counterplay, a lot of back and forth. It was a really, really good time.
Interactive magic.
I guess after going through it, would there be anything that you think you'd want to change about it? Anything that didn't quite measure up?
I would love to see monocolored decks be a little more viable.
Interesting.
Specifically, if it were only one, like mono red, being able to go under whatever your opponent is doing as fast as possible. I would love to see that. If I were to make changes, it would be like a couple more 1-drops. Make sure the consistency is there for that type of deck. But we were experimenting, as you said, with more multicolor. How would that impact the environment? I think it had a positive impact. I think having mono red be stronger would have a positive impact as well. They're both good. It just depends what you and I ultimately decide we want for the cube.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. I think like disagree with that a little bit. I actually think by introducing more focus on monocolor archetypes, you're then taking away from like the multicolored nature of the cube and nature of like JUND, where it is, I think, being able to pick cards that are just generically good, whereas a lot more 1-drops only fit into those specific archetypes. But I can definitely see having more of those 1-drops to bolster the more aggressive decks. So if there are the like JUND decks that are more in the kind of like 3 to 5 mana range, there are some decks that can kind of like oppose it with the more like 1 to 2 drops.
There's a natural check to it. Interesting. Well, I tried. I did my best as the mono red player to sneak in more mono red.
I guess and
he got me.
I guess me who has made the mono red deck really felt it not coming together. And I don't know if I, like, after playing it, I think playing the JUND cube, it really felt like it was more enjoyable to just try and get a bit greedy, push the mana base, which is, I guess, like, the thing that I found was, I think could be bolstered a little bit. We have the sub-theme of lands in there. And in the last draft, because we're playing with a cube of about 200 cards, we don't see a portion of it in the grid draft. And we actually didn't end up seeing any of the fetches. So that, we definitely felt that.
It was rough.
It hurt.
It was rough. Not being able to get some early mana with my Deathrite Shaman wasn't fun.
Yep.
Sort of banking on the, oh, I'll take these and just one fetch will smooth it out as easy riding. And that never happened. I do like having the surplus of cards and having a little bit of variance every draft.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't change.
Yeah.
It's just a byproduct that sometimes you're not going to see any of one type of card, or the top end of whatever deck just won't show up.
Yeah, I definitely do think just upping the amount of lands just a little bit. Nothing too crazy, maybe like playing double fetches, so having like 2 of each of those. Maybe like an alternative solution could be seeding it a little bit, but that seems like a bit like finicky. But yeah, I think that was the biggest thing, is the fact that we had lands as a minor archetype and the land count being relatively low was definitely felt.
And despite that, it still came together, and you crushed it with the land archetype.
It's very true. Yeah, and that could just be up to variance. But yeah, I think at the end of it, I think there's a very like successful experiment. I think coming out of it with the amount of multicolor cards that we had in it, I think that felt really nice. Just being able to play with a bunch of like some of the games having just like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 Golgari cards or something like that. Felt good.
It's an interesting design decision that I'm only really realizing now, having fewer lands than one would expect, but having the lands archetype and having a larger multicolor section. So you see the cheese, you want to be greedy, you want to take that, and it is easier to be punished because there is not the flourishing amount of lands and fixing that you can guarantee, like, oh yeah, I'll pick up 2 fetches, I'll pick up shocks, this is all going to go smoothly. I, in our second draft, fell victim to that, despite having some good lands.
I think overall, great time. Great cube, great games, great drafts. All in all, big success. Would do it again.
I guess if we want to answer our own questions, we got to draft it more. Damn. Oh no.
Yeah, so that basically wraps up that, and we'll just move on to a little section that I'm unabashedly taking from one of my favorite podcasts, Triple Click, where they end off with just talking about one more thing. And one more thing is just each of us is just going to talk about something that is unrelated to Magic, but something we'd like to talk about that's going in our life. That could be anything from movies or books or events. Who knows? So, Hayden, what's your one more thing?
My one more thing is One Piece.
Oh, yeah.
One Piece, very good. I am rapidly approaching, I'm reading the manga, I should say. I am rapidly approaching the halfway point of One Piece, and no spoilers, it's really good. Read it. There's something in storytelling where you have like a promise you make to the audience. So in Breaking Bad, there's Walter White is making drugs and his brother-in-law works for the DEA. And the promise to the audience is at some point they will come, this will come to a head. They will come into conflict. I feel like One Piece has done that exceptionally well. There's setup, payoff, there's long-term coming together of so much that is promised, and it feels really rewarding, feels really good, other than it'll make you cry. It's... I love it. I had previously watched a ton and then stopped during Ennis Lobby, and then I decided when Oda took the 1-month break earlier in 2023, maybe late 2022, that, well, this is the best time I have to catch up. There's not going to be a better opportunity than this to start if I want to. So I did, and I don't regret it. It's excellent.
Nice. My one more thing is I've been playing a lot of a game called Dave the Diver. Dave the Diver is a very, very fun game. Definitely check it out, but it's just this like really polished experience where you play as Dave and you go out fishing with a harpoon gun during the day, and then at night you bring all of what you catch back to a sushi restaurant and play kind of like a diner dash like mini game. But this game just layers on so much progression. It feels like each time you play, they're gonna introduce something new and fresh, and it keeps expanding upon with just like mini games and story and like the like upgrades that you get, and everything just feeds into all the like the core systems so nicely. Like there's I'm about 20 hours in the game, and I think around like the 16-hour mark or so, a rhythm game mini game showed up once, and I hope it shows up again. But it feels like there's been these like small mini games that show up. They're just like really fun, really simple, fit into it very like thematically, and yeah, you just play through them like, oh, that's just a nice little change of pace, and the team is doing really good stuff. So Dave the Diver, check out that game.
I had seen it when it released on Steam, and it looked pretty good. People reviewed it pretty highly. I was like, oh, there's a little fishing game. That's cool. I did not know there was so much depth to it.
Yes,
Pun
absolutely.
not intended.
Well, that's been it for this episode of Cube Cruisin'. Thank you for listening. Our cover art is by Brittany Thompson, and all the music credits can be found in the show notes. I've been Eric, joined by my good friend and co-host Hayden. And a little teaser for the next episode, you can tune in. We'll be checking out Hayden's Artifact Tubert.
Ooh, 180 cards. We'll see how it goes. I think it'll go well.
I think it will go well.
First episode in the bag.
Yeah.
We got it.
We got it.
Only gets easier from here, I'm sure.